When my father looked me dead in the eye at our family reunion and called me the biggest disappointment this family has ever produced, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled and quietly slid a manila envelope across the mahogany dining table. Inside were the papers that proved I now owned every brick, every window, and every square inch of the $2.3 million estate he was sitting in, the same estate he was about to lose to foreclosure. But let me start from the beginning, because the road to that moment began 6 months earlier with a phone call that changed everything. My name is Cameron Reed, and if you asked anyone in Millbrook Heights about the Reed family, they'd tell you we were Silicon Valley royalty. At least that's what my parents, Jonathan and Patricia Reed, wanted everyone to believe. Our family mansion on Prospect Hill Drive was the crown jewel of the neighborhood. 12,000 square feet of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley below. But I knew the truth that no one else did. I'd known it for years. I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment in downtown Riverside, 3 time zones away from the family fortune, when my laptop pinged with a Google alert I'd set up years ago. Reed Industries stock plummets 47% following SEC investigation. My coffee went cold as I read the article. Dad's tech empire, the company that had funded our privileged childhood, was crumbling faster than a house of cards in an earthquake. This wasn't exactly shocking news to me. I'd been tracking Reed Industries' financials for the past 2 years, ever since I'd started working as a forensic accountant for Hartwell and Associates. What I discovered in public filings and SEC documents painted a picture of a company hemorrhaging money, covering massive losses with creative accounting and one very expensive lifestyle that my parents couldn't actually afford. But here's what made this personal. For the past 8 years, ever since I'd graduated college with a degree in accounting instead of the prestigious law degree they'd demanded, my parents had systematically cut me out of their lives. Christmas cards stopped coming, birthday calls became birthday texts, then nothing at all. When I'd gotten engaged to my college sweetheart, Dylan, they didn't even RSVP to the wedding invitation. The final straw had come 3 years ago when I'd tried to visit for Thanksgiving. Patricia, I'd stopped calling her mom after she told me I was a waste of expensive education, answered the door in a $4,000 designer dress and told me I wasn't welcome unless I got my life together and stopped embarrassing the family name. My crime? I'd chosen to work for a mid-size accounting firm instead of joining the family business. I'd married a public school teacher instead of a venture capitalist. I'd bought a modest apartment instead of accepting their money for a house in their exclusive neighborhood. To them, I was the daughter who'd thrown away every advantage they'd given me. To me, they were the parents who loved their image more than their own child. So, when I saw that news alert about Reed Industries, I'll admit it, I felt something between vindication and satisfaction. After years of being told I was the family failure, watching their empire crumble felt like cosmic justice. That feeling lasted exactly 4 hours. I was finishing up a client audit when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Cameron Reed?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional, slightly nervous. "Yes, who's asking?" "This is David Moorcock from First National Mortgage Services. I'm calling about your parents' property on Prospect Hill Drive. Our records show you as an emergency contact." My stomach dropped. Emergency contact for what? A pause. "Ma'am, I'm required to inform you that the property is currently in pre-foreclosure. The borrowers are 180 days behind on payments, and we've been unable to reach them despite multiple attempts. The foreclosure notice will be filed next week unless the full amount is brought current." I set down my pen, my hand suddenly unsteady. "What's the total amount owed?" $2,347,892.16, including penalties and fees. Over $2 million. The house I'd grown up in, the symbol of everything my parents valued more than me, was about to be seized by the bank. Despite everything they'd done, despite years of rejection and humiliation, I felt something crack inside my chest. "Have you tried reaching them at Reed Industries?" I asked. Another pause. "Ma'am, according to our information, Reed Industries filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection last month. The assets are frozen pending reorganization." I thanked him and hung up, then sat in my quiet office as the evening sun slanted through the blinds. My parents were about to lose everything: the house, the cars, the lifestyle they'd sacrificed their relationship with me to maintain. All of it was slipping away while they were too proud to ask for help.
That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I opened my laptop and began researching mortgage buyout procedures. As a forensic accountant, I knew exactly how these transactions worked. When a property goes into foreclosure, anyone can purchase the debt from the bank, usually at a significant discount. The new debt holder then becomes the mortgage servicer with full legal authority to collect payments or proceed with foreclosure. By 11 p.m. that night, I had a plan. The next morning, I called my boss, Amanda Hartwell, and requested an urgent meeting. Amanda was one of those rare people who'd built her accounting firm from nothing into a powerhouse that served Fortune 500 companies. She was also the closest thing I had to a mentor. "You want to buy your parents' mortgage?" she said after I had explained the situation. "Cameron, that's over $2 million. "I've been saving for 8 years," I said. "Between my salary, Dylan's teaching income, and some smart investments, I can cover it. Barely, but I can do it." Amanda leaned back in her chair, studying me. "This isn't about the money, is it?" "No," I admitted. "It's about proving that the daughter they wrote off as a failure is the only one with the resources to save them." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "I assume you'll need some time off to handle the paperwork." Within 48 hours, I was on a plane to California with a briefcase full of financial documents and a cashier's check that represented nearly every dollar Dylan and I had saved during our marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was flying first class to buy my parents' house using money I'd earned from the worthless career they had mocked. The mortgage company was more than happy to sell the debt. Pre-foreclosure properties are risky assets, and they jumped at the chance to recoup their money from a qualified buyer. The paperwork took 3 days to complete, but by Friday afternoon, I was the legal owner of my childhood home's mortgage account. My parents still didn't know their house was in foreclosure. They definitely didn't know their estranged daughter now held the keys to their financial future. That would all change in exactly 2 weeks, when Patricia's annual family reunion brought together every Reed relative, family friend, and business associate to celebrate another year of success and prosperity. It was going to be the most interesting dinner party in Reed family history. If you're loving what you're hearing, smash that subscribe button. It really keeps us going. All right, let's jump back in. I spent the flight back to Riverside staring out the window, the mortgage documents locked in my briefcase like a loaded weapon. Legally, I now owned my parents' debt. Emotionally, I felt like I was carrying a live grenade with the pin half pulled. Dylan picked me up at the airport, taking one look at my face and deciding not to ask questions until we got home. "So," he said as we sat on our tiny balcony that night, sharing a bottle of wine that cost less than my mother's weekly manicure, "you actually did it." I did it. I pulled out the deed of trust transfer, the document that made me the new mortgage holder. Cameron Reed is now the legal creditor for 1247 Prospect Hill Drive, Millbrook Heights. "Whistled low," Dylan said. "How long until they find out?" "That depends on whether they bother to read their mail. I'd already confirmed with the mortgage company that all future correspondence would be sent to my address as the new servicer. They'd been ignoring foreclosure notices for 6 months. They might ignore this too." But I wasn't counting on their ignorance. Over the next week, I dove deep into investigative mode, using every forensic accounting skill I'd learned to piece together the full scope of my parents' financial disaster. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. Reed Industries hadn't just failed. It had been a house of cards for years. Jonathan had been using company funds to maintain their personal lifestyle, shifting money between accounts to cover mortgage payments, car loans, and credit card bills that totaled over $800,000. When the SEC investigation began, the board had frozen all assets, leaving my parents with exactly zero legitimate income. But here's where it got interesting. They were still spending like nothing had changed. I found Patricia's social media accounts, which she'd never bothered to make private. Instagram posts from the past month showed her at exclusive restaurants, luxury shopping trips, and spa weekends that must have cost thousands. Her latest post, from just 3 days ago, showed her holding champagne flutes with her sister Delphine at some charity gala, captioned, "Blessed to give back to our community. Hashtag read family values. Hashtag gratitude." The hypocrisy made my teeth ache. I cross-referenced her post with credit card statements I could access through public court filings from the Reed Industries bankruptcy. They were funding their fake lifestyle with cash advances and personal loans, borrowing against assets they were about to lose. The math was brutal. At their current spending rate, they had maybe 6 weeks before complete financial collapse. That's when I realized they were planning something desperate. A deep dive into real estate records showed they'd been quietly meeting with luxury home realtors trying to sell the Prospect Hill property. The problem is, you can't sell a house that's in foreclosure without paying off the mortgage first. But they could potentially find a buyer willing to pay enough to cover the debt and give them a small profit to restart somewhere else. If they managed to sell before the reunion, my entire plan would collapse. Worse, they'd escape the consequences of their financial recklessness and probably blame me somehow for not helping them when they needed me. I couldn't let that happen. The next morning, I called my real estate attorney, Jennifer Nakamura, and explained the situation. "Can they sell the house while I hold the mortgage?" "Technically, yes," Jennifer said. "But as the mortgage holder, you have to approve any sale and you have the right to demand immediate payment in full. You could also call the loan due immediately if they violate any terms of the mortgage agreement." "What kind of violations?" "Missing payments, obviously, but also any attempt to transfer the property without notifying the mortgage holder or using the property as collateral for other loans without permission." I smiled for the first time in days. "Jennifer, I need you to file a formal notice of mortgage transfer with the county recorder's office. I want it on public record that I'm the new creditor." "Cameron, that's going to generate a paper trail. Your parents will find out." "Good, let them find out. But I want to control when and how." While Jennifer handled the legal paperwork, I turned my attention to gathering intelligence about the family reunion. Patricia had been planning this event for months, treating it like a personal coronation where she could show off their wealth and success to relatives who hadn't seen them since the Reed Industries collapse became public. I called my cousin Bryce, Jonathan's nephew, who'd always been the family gossip and surprisingly still talked to me despite my failure status. "What's the mood like for the reunion?" I asked. "Honestly, weird," Bryce said. "Your parents are acting like everything's fine, but everyone's talking about the company going under. Uncle Jonathan keeps saying he's got big announcements planned for dinner. Patricia's been texting everyone about dress codes and protocols like she's hosting foreign royalty." "Protocols?" "Yeah, apparently we're all supposed to bring gratitude letters about how the Reed family has influenced our lives. She wants to read them aloud during dinner. The whole thing feels like a desperate attempt to remind everyone how important they used to be." I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Patricia was planning a celebration of Reed family superiority, a chance to bask in inherited glory, while their financial world crumbled around them. She probably intended to use the event to announce their plans to downsize or relocate, spending their forced sale as a choice rather than a consequence. The irony was perfect. She was throwing a party to celebrate everything they were about to lose, and I was the only one who could save them from losing it. But salvation would come with conditions. I spent the next week crafting my strategy. First, I confirmed my attendance at the reunion, something I hadn't done in 3 years. Patricia's response was a cold email asking if I planned to dress appropriately, and reminding me that this is a family celebration, not a platform for personal drama. If she only knew. Second, I prepared my documentation. Every mortgage payment they had missed, every legal notice they had ignored, every public record showing their financial collapse. I also gathered evidence of their continued spending despite claiming poverty, restaurant receipts, shopping purchases, travel expenses that totaled more than most people's annual salaries. But the most important preparation was emotional. I called my therapist, Dr. Ruiz, and spent 2 sessions working through the complicated feelings of holding this kind of power over the people who rejected me. "You're not doing this just for revenge," she reminded me. "You're doing it because you're the only family member with the resources and knowledge to prevent them from becoming homeless." She was right. Buried under years of hurt and anger was still a daughter who didn't want to see her parents lose everything, even if they'd lost her first. 3 days before the reunion, I got the call I'd been expecting. It was Patricia, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Cameron, I need to speak with you immediately." "Hello to you too, Patricia. What's wrong?" "Don't play games with me. We received some very disturbing paperwork in the mail today. Legal documents claiming that you've somehow purchased our mortgage. This has to be some kind of mistake or fraud." I let the silence stretch for a long moment. "It's not a mistake." "What do you mean it's not a mistake? You can't just buy someone's mortgage. That's not how mortgages work." "Actually, that's exactly how mortgages work. When a property goes into foreclosure, the debt can be sold to qualified buyers. Congratulations, Patricia. Your mortgage is now held by Reed Financial Holdings, LLC. Reed Financial Holdings? My company. I'm the sole owner and operator, which means, legally speaking, you now owe me $2,347,892.16, plus accumulated interest and fees." The sound she made wasn't quite a gasp and wasn't quite a scream. "This is insane! You're insane! We're calling our lawyer." "You should definitely do that. In fact, I recommend you bring your lawyer to the reunion on Saturday. You'll want legal representation for what I'm planning to discuss." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. The game was officially in motion, and there was no turning back now. In 3 days, I would walk into that mansion for the first time in years, not as the disappointing daughter they'd written off, but as the woman who held their entire future in her hands. The reunion was set for Saturday at 6 p.m., but my real preparation began Friday morning when I drove the 3 hours from Riverside to Millbrook Heights. I hadn't been back to my hometown in over 2 years, and seeing the familiar hills dotted with mansions made my stomach tighten with old memories. Nothing had changed except me. I checked into the Grandview Hotel, a 5-star establishment that Patricia would consider appropriate for a Reed family member. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was probably the only Reed who could actually afford to stay there anymore. From my suite on the 8th floor, I had a perfect view of Prospect Hill Drive, where the family mansion sat like a monument to everything I'd supposedly failed to achieve. That evening, I called my cousin Bryce to get final intelligence on the family's mood. "It's chaos over there," he reported. "Patricia's been screaming at the catering staff all day. Jonathan locked himself in his study with a bottle of whiskey and hasn't come out since yesterday. And get this, they hired security for the party." "Security? For a family dinner?" "2 guys in suits standing at the gate. Patricia told everyone it's because of recent threats to the family's safety. But honestly, I think she's afraid you're going to show up with reporters or something." I almost laughed. Patricia's paranoia was working in my favor. By hiring security and making a big production out of protecting themselves, she was essentially admitting that she saw me as a genuine threat. Good, she should. Saturday morning brought an unexpected complication. My phone rang at 7 a.m. with a call from Jennifer Nakamura. "Cameron, we have a problem. I just received a call from a law firm in San Francisco, Pemberton, Walsh and Associates. They're representing your parents, and they're claiming the mortgage transfer was fraudulent." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. Fraudulent how? They're arguing that you had insider knowledge of the family's financial situation that gave you an unfair advantage in purchasing the debt. They're threatening to file an injunction to block the transfer. Can they do that? It's a long shot, but they could tie it up in court for months if they file the right paperwork. The real question is, do your parents actually have money to pay Pemberton Walsh? Because those guys charge $800 an hour. I thought about this for a moment. No, they don't have that kind of money, which means someone else is funding their legal defense. Any idea who? I had several ideas, and none of them were good. Jonathan had 3 brothers, all successful in their own right, and all protective of the Reed family reputation. If they were pooling resources to fight me, this could get very expensive very quickly. Jennifer, I need you to file a motion to accelerate the loan. If they want to challenge the transfer, they can do it while making their payments current. Cameron, that's playing hardball. You'd be demanding the full $2.3 million immediately. That's exactly what I'm doing. They want to lawyer up? Fine, but they can do it while the foreclosure clock keeps ticking. After hanging up with Jennifer, I called Dylan to update him on the situation. Are you sure you want to escalate this? Once you file that motion, there's no going back to a quiet family reconciliation. Dylan, there was never going to be a quiet family reconciliation. They hired attack lawyers instead of calling me directly. They're treating this like a war, so I'm going to give them one. The rest of Saturday morning was spent in preparation that felt oddly similar to getting ready for combat. I selected my outfit carefully, a tailored black dress that was elegant but not flashy, paired with my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one piece of Reed family jewelry I inherited before they decided I was persona non grata. The symbolism was intentional. I was walking into their house wearing the legacy they'd tried to deny me. At 4 p.m., I received a text from Patricia. Cameron, we need to discuss this mortgage situation privately before dinner. Please arrive early. I responded, see you at 6 p.m. with everyone. At 5:30, I drove up Prospect Hill Drive for the first time in 3 years. The mansion looked exactly the same from the outside, imposing, pristine, and completely disconnected from financial reality. The circular driveway was already filled with luxury cars belonging to various Reed relatives and family friends. 2 men in dark suits stood at the entrance, eyeing every arrival with professional suspicion. I parked my modest Honda Civic between a Mercedes and a BMW, enjoying the visual metaphor. As I walked toward the front door, one of the security guards stepped forward. Ma'am, I'll need to see some identification and confirm you're on the guest list. I handed him my driver's license. Cameron Reed. He checked his tablet, frowned, then spoke into his earpiece. I have Cameron Reed at the front entrance. A pause. Understood. He looked back at me. You're cleared to enter, but I've been instructed to inform you that any disruptive behavior will result in immediate removal from the property. Noted, I said, walking past him into the marble foyer that had intimidated me as a child and now just looked expensive and cold.
The house was exactly as I remembered. Too large, too formal, too focused on impressing people rather than sheltering a family. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers, and the air smelled like Patricia's signature candles, some $200 per piece nonsense that was supposed to evoke Mediterranean elegance. I could hear conversation and laughter from the main dining room, but I took a moment to walk through the living room where family photos still lined the mantelpiece. There I was at various ages, gap-toothed at 7, awkward at 14, graduating from college at 22. But there were no photos of my wedding, no pictures of me and Dylan, nothing from the past 8 years. It was like I died when I chose my own path. Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. I turned to find my uncle Nathaniel, Jonathan's youngest brother, holding a martini and wearing the kind of smug expression that had made me avoid family gatherings even before the official estrangement. "Hello, Nate. Still drinking top-shelf liquor while other people pay your bills?" His smile faltered. "At least I'm not trying to steal my parents' house." "Actually, I bought their house. Or rather, I bought their debt. There's a difference. Though I wouldn't expect you to understand the distinction. You think you're so smart with your little accounting degree, but you have no idea what kind of forces you're messing with here." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Forces? You mean the legal team that someone's funding to fight me? Let me guess. You and your brothers are splitting the legal fees because you can't stand the idea of the family disappointment having power over the family golden boy?" Nathaniel's face reddened slightly. "Jonathan built this family's reputation. He doesn't deserve to be destroyed by his own daughter's petty revenge." "Jonathan destroyed himself. I'm just the one with enough money and backbone to deal with the consequences." Before he could respond, Patricia's voice cut through the air, like a dinner bell. "Everyone, please take your seats. Dinner is served." I followed the crowd into the dining room, noting how conversations stopped when people saw me. The massive mahogany table was set for 22 people, with Patricia and Jonathan at opposite ends, like a king and queen holding court. My assigned seat was about as far from them as possible, squeezed between a cousin I barely knew and an empty chair. Patricia stood at the head of the table, resplendent in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Welcome, family and friends, to our annual celebration of gratitude and togetherness. This year has brought challenges, but it has also reminded us of the strength of family bonds and the importance of loyalty." Her eyes found mine across the table, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear mixed with desperate defiance. She was performing for an audience that included several family members who were probably questioning whether funding her legal defense was worth the investment. "Before we begin our meal," she continued, "I'd like to address some recent confusion regarding our family's financial affairs. Some individuals have chosen to exploit private family matters for personal gain, but I want everyone to know that the Reed family does not negotiate with extortion." A murmur went through the room. Several people looked at me, but I kept my expression neutral, taking a sip of the wine that probably cost more per bottle than I used to spend on groceries in a month. Jonathan finally spoke up from his end of the table, his voice slightly slurred. "What Patricia is trying to say is that some people in this family have forgotten what loyalty means. Some people think that because they have a little money saved up, they can manipulate and control their own parents." "How much money do you think I have, Jonathan?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room. He blinked, apparently not expecting me to respond directly. That's not the point." "No, I think it is the point. You're sitting in a house you can't afford, at a table paid for credit cards you can't pay off, lecturing me on loyalty while you're too proud to admit you need help. So I'm curious, how much money do you think your disappointing daughter actually saved up?" Patricia's face had gone pale. "Cameron, this is neither the time nor the place." "Actually, this is exactly the time and the place." I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper, placing it on the table where everyone could see it. "This is the deed of trust transfer that makes me the legal holder of your mortgage. And the number at the bottom? That's how much I paid to keep you from losing your house." The silence that followed was absolute. 22 people stared at that piece of paper like it was a bomb that had just been placed on the table. Because, in a way, it was. The paper sat on the mahogany table like evidence in a murder trial. 22 pairs of eyes moved from the document to me, then to Jonathan and Patricia, then back to me. The only sound was the soft classical music still playing from the hidden speakers, now feeling absurdly inappropriate for what was unfolding. My uncle Nathaniel was the first to break the silence. $2.3 million? You paid $2.3 million?
plus fees and penalties, I confirmed, keeping my tone conversational. The total purchase price was $2,347,892.16, to be exact. Patricia gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. You're lying. You don't have that kind of money. You work for some nobody accounting firm and live in a studio apartment. Actually, I live in a one-bedroom apartment with my husband. And you're right about my salary. $87,000 a year isn't exactly Fortune 500 money. But you know what 8 years of saving looks like when you don't spend $50,000 a year on clothes and spa treatments? Jonathan's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is extortion. You can't just buy someone's debt and hold it over them. I absolutely can. It's called a mortgage assignment, and it's completely legal. Jennifer Nakamura from Nakamura and Associates handled all the paperwork. Would you like her phone number? I'm sure your expensive lawyers have already looked into it. My cousin Delphine, Patricia's sister, leaned forward with the kind of horrified fascination people reserve for car accidents. Cameron, why would you do this to your own family? That's an interesting question, Delphine. Let me ask you one back. When's the last time Jonathan or Patricia treated me like family? The table erupted in murmurs and side conversations. I caught fragments. She has a point. And this is insane. And how did she get that much money? Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Everyone, please excuse us. Cameron and I need to have a private conversation. Sit down, Patricia. My voice cut through the noise like a blade. You wanted a family dinner. You wanted to celebrate Reed family values in front of everyone. Then let's talk about those values. Cameron, Elizabeth Reed, you will not what? Embarrass you? Expose the truth? Make you uncomfortable in your own home? I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. The home that I now legally own the mortgage to? Jonathan lurched to his feet, swaying slightly from the whiskey. You ungrateful little... Ungrateful? I laughed, and the sound was sharper than I intended. Jonathan, let me tell you what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that when you told me I was wasting my expensive education by becoming an accountant, I ignored you and learned how to manage money. I'm grateful that when you said I was throwing my life away by marrying a teacher, I ignored you and found someone who actually loves me. And I'm grateful that you cut me out of this family for not living up to your impossible standards. I learned to build a life that doesn't depend on your approval. The room was dead silent now, except for the ridiculous classical music. Patricia's face had gone from pale to flushed to pale again. You don't understand the pressures we've been under. The company, the investigation, the media attention. I understand perfectly. I've been tracking Reed Industries' financials for 2 years. I know about the SEC investigation, the frozen assets, the personal loans you've been taking against company stock. I know you've been living on credit cards and cash advances for months. I also know that instead of calling me, your daughter, who works in finance, you hired lawyers to fight me. My Uncle Harrison, Jonathan's middle brother, cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should all take a step back and... No. I turned to face him directly. Harrison, you're helping fund their legal defense, aren't you? You and Nathaniel and probably Uncle George too. You're so concerned about the family reputation that you'd rather spend thousands on lawyers than admit that maybe, just maybe, the daughter you all wrote off is the only one who saw this coming and prepared for it? Harrison's silence was confirmation enough. I turned back to Jonathan and Patricia, who were standing at opposite ends of the table like generals facing a battlefield they were losing. Here's what's going to happen. I continued. You have 2 choices. Choice 1, keep fighting me in court while the foreclosure clock keeps ticking. Your lawyers might delay things for a few months, but eventually you'll lose because I followed every law and procedure correctly. When that happens, I'll proceed with foreclosure, and you'll lose the house anyway. Plus, you'll owe your brothers whatever money they've spent on legal fees." Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "What's choice two?"
I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, setting it on the table next to the mortgage document. I want an apology, not just to me, but to Dylan. I want you to acknowledge that the way you've treated us for the past 8 years was wrong. I want you to admit that I didn't fail. I succeeded despite you trying to sabotage me. And I want everyone in this room to hear it. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Patricia looked around the table at all the family members and friends who were watching this drama unfold, their expressions ranging from shock to fascination to secondhand embarrassment. "You want me to humiliate myself in front of our family?" she said finally. "I want you to tell the truth in front of our family. There's a difference." Jonathan stepped forward, his face cycling through anger, desperation, and something that might have been resignation. "And if we don't? If we refuse?" I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a nice smile. "Then I'll see you in foreclosure court in 30 days. I'll be the one sitting at the plaintiff's table while you explain to a judge why you think you shouldn't have to pay your debts. And when this house gets auctioned off to the highest bidder, I'll make sure every real estate blog and society page knows exactly why the Reed family mansion hit the market." My cousin Bryce, who had been unusually quiet throughout the entire confrontation, suddenly spoke up. "Just apologize. Jesus Christ, just apologize to her. She's offering you a way out." "She's blackmailing us," Patricia snapped. "No," said a voice from the other end of the table. It was Dylan's Aunt Margaret, a woman I barely knew but who had always been kind to me at family gatherings. "You're offering her exactly what you never offered her, a second chance." Patricia looked around the table again, seeing the faces of people who had watched her spend money she didn't have, maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford, and treat her own daughter like an embarrassment. Some of them were sympathetic, others were clearly enjoying watching the family matriarch brought low, but none of them were going to save her. She sank back into her chair, her designer dress suddenly looking like a costume from a play that had ended. "What exactly do you want me to say?" I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "I want you to say that I was never a failure. I want you to say that choosing my own career and my own husband was my right, not my mistake. I want you to say that cutting me out of this family was cruel and wrong. And I want you to say that you're proud of me for being strong enough to save you from your own financial disaster." Jonathan was staring at his hands, but Patricia was looking directly at me now. For the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that looked almost like respect. "Cameron, you were never a failure." The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished fire. She took a deep breath and continued. "You chose your own path, and that was your right. Cutting me out of this family was cruel and wrong. And I'm proud of you for being strong enough to save us from our own mistakes." The relief that flooded through me was so unexpected and so powerful that I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. 8 years of rejection, 8 years of being told I wasn't good enough, 8 years of wondering if maybe they were right. All of it evaporated in that moment. But I wasn't done yet. "Now, Jonathan," I said, turning to face my father. "Your turn." Jonathan remained standing at his end of the table, swaying slightly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity as everyone waited to see if he would follow Patricia's lead or dig in for one final battle. "No," he said finally, his voice thick with alcohol and stubborn pride. "I won't do it. I won't sit here and let my own daughter humiliate me in front of my family." A collective intake of breath went around the table. Patricia's face went white. "Jonathan, please." "Please what? Please grovel to the daughter who's trying to steal our house? Please pretend that everything we've worked for means nothing?" He turned to face me directly, his eyes bloodshot but blazing with defiance. You want an apology, Cameron? Here's what I'm sorry about. I'm sorry I paid for your expensive education so you could use it against us. I'm sorry I raised you with privileges that taught you to think you're better than your own family. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs, but I held up my hand for silence. I felt strangely calm, like I was watching this unfold from a great distance. Are you finished? I'm finished with this whole charade. You want the house, take it, but don't expect me to thank you for destroying what's left of this family. I nodded slowly, then reached for my phone and ended the recording. Okay, then we're done here.
I stood up and walked to Jonathan's end of the table, stopping just close enough to see the fear creeping into his eyes behind the bravado. You're right about one thing, Jonathan. The education you paid for did teach me something important. It taught me that numbers don't lie, people do. And you've been lying to yourself for so long that you actually believe your own fiction. I pulled a manila folder from my purse and set it on the table in front of him. These are financial projections showing exactly how long you can maintain your current lifestyle with zero income. The answer is about 6 more weeks, assuming you can keep finding people to loan you money. After that, you'll be bankrupt, homeless, and probably facing criminal charges for some of the creative accounting you did with Reed Industries. Jonathan's hands trembled slightly as he stared at the folder without opening it. But here's the thing, I continued. Patricia apologized. That means she gets the deal I offered. Reduced principal, extended payment terms, waived penalties. She gets to keep her home and rebuild her life with dignity. I turned to look at Patricia, who was watching this exchange with tears in her eyes. The house will be transferred to Patricia Reed individually. The mortgage will be restructured based on her ability to pay, not your pride. You can't do that, Jonathan sputtered. I'm on the deed. This is my house too. Actually, I can do exactly that. As the mortgage holder, I have the right to approve any changes to the ownership structure. And since you just publicly refused to negotiate, you're no longer part of the negotiation. My Uncle Nathaniel leaned forward. Cameron, you can't just kick your father out of his own house. I'm not kicking him out. I'm offering him the same deal I offered the Tricia. All he has to do is apologize for treating his daughter like garbage for 8 years. I looked back at Jonathan. The offer stands for exactly 60 seconds. After that, it's foreclosure for both of you. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Jonathan looked around a table at faces that were no longer sympathetic, no longer impressed by his bluster. His brothers, who had been funding his legal defense, were staring at him like they were seeing him clearly for the first time. 30 seconds, I said softly. Patricia reached across the table and grabbed Jonathan's hand. Please, she whispered, I can't lose everything because of your pride. 15 seconds. Jonathan's facade finally cracked. His shoulder sagged, and when he looked at me, I saw not the angry, controlling father I'd been fighting, but a broken man who had run out of options. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. I can't hear you. He cleared his throat and spoke louder. I'm sorry, Cameron. I'm sorry for treating you badly. I'm sorry for cutting you out of the family. You're not a failure. You never were. It wasn't the heartfelt apology Patricia had given, but it was enough. Thank you, I said, putting my phone away. Jennifer Nakamura will contact you both next week to discuss the new mortgage terms. The monthly payment will be about $3,800, which should be manageable if you're willing to adjust your lifestyle. I picked up my purse and walked toward the dining room exit, then paused at the doorway. One more thing. Dylan and I will be coming for Christmas this year, and every Christmas after that, because despite everything that's happened, you're still my parents, and I still love you, even when I don't like you very much. Patricia started crying then, not the delicate tears of someone trying to preserve their makeup, but the ugly, honest sobs of someone who had been holding too much inside for too long. Several family members got up to comfort her, while others sat in stunned silence processing what they had just witnessed. I walked out of that house the same way I'd walked into it 8 years ago when they first cut me off, alone. But this time, I wasn't running away from their rejection. I was walking towards something better.
The drive back to Riverside gave me 3 hours to decompress from what had just happened. I called Dylan from the road and told him everything, including Jonathan's resistance and final capitulation. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now we restructure their mortgage to something they can actually afford. Patricia can keep the house, but she'll have to sell most of the luxury items and learn to live within her means. Jonathan will have to find a job, probably working for someone else for the first time in his adult life. And what about you? How do you feel?" I thought about that for a long moment as the California hills rolled past my window. I feel free. For 8 years, I've been carrying around this anger and hurt, letting it drive me to prove them wrong. But tonight, I realized I don't need their validation anymore. I never did. Does that mean you forgive them? I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, and it's not the same as pretending they didn't hurt me. But holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting them.
2 weeks later, I was back in my office at Hartwell and Associates when Jennifer called with an update. The mortgage restructuring is complete. The new principal balance is $1.8 million, and they've agreed to a 30-year repayment schedule at 4% interest. Patricia has also listed several pieces of jewelry and artwork for sale to help with the down payment. What about Jonathan? He started a new job yesterday. Entry-level financial consultant at a firm in downtown Millbrook Heights. The pay is about a quarter of what he used to make, but it's honest work. I smiled at that. There was something poetic about Jonathan having to start over in the same industry where he'd once been a big shot. "There's one more thing," Jennifer continued. "I received a letter addressed to you from Patricia. She asked me to forward it." The letter arrived the next day, written in Patricia's careful handwriting on expensive stationery that she'd probably owned since before their financial collapse. "Dear Cameron," it began, "I've been trying to write this letter for 2 weeks, and I keep starting over because nothing I say feels adequate for what I need to express. You saved us, not just financially, though that's certainly true. You saved us from our own arrogance and denial. You saved us from becoming the kind of people who lose everything and then blame everyone else for their failures. I spent 8 years telling myself that you had made wrong choices, that you had wasted your potential, that you had disappointed us. The truth is that you made brave choices. You chose love over status, integrity over image, and genuine success over the appearance of success. When I watched you walk out of our house that night, I realized that you had become everything I had hoped you would be, just not in the way I had imagined. You are strong, principled, successful, and generous. You are exactly the daughter any parent should be proud to claim. I don't expect you to forget what we put you through, and I don't expect immediate forgiveness. But I hope that someday, when enough time has passed for these wounds to heal, you might consider giving us another chance to be the parents you deserved all along. Your payments are never late, by the way. The check arrives on the 15th of every month, exactly on schedule. Jonathan says that's because you were raised right. I think it's because you are right about everything, and you always have been. Thank you for saving us from ourselves. Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like, and thank you for still calling us your parents, even when we forgot how to be them. Love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it in my desk drawer. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in over 2 years. Hello? Hi, Mom. It's Cameron. I was wondering if you and Dad wanted to come visit us for Thanksgiving this year. Dylan's been working on his turkey recipe, and I think you'd like our apartment. It's small, but it's home. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough for me to wonder if I'd made a mistake. Then Patricia's voice came through, warm and grateful, and more genuine than I'd heard it in years. "We would love that, sweetheart. We would absolutely love that." 6 months later, I was promoted to senior partner at Hartwell and Associates. The promotion came with a significant raise and the opportunity to choose my own cases. I decided to specialize in something new, helping families navigate financial crises before they destroyed relationships. My first client was a couple in their 60s who had been living beyond their means for decades, funding their lifestyle with credit cards and home equity loans. Their adult children had stopped speaking to them because of constant requests for money and the shame of watching their parents spiral into financial chaos. It was a familiar story, but this time I was the one with the knowledge and resources to help. This time I could prevent a family from falling apart instead of watching it happen from the outside. During our first meeting, the wife looked at me across my desk and asked me, "Do you really think there's hope for us? Do you think our children will ever forgive us?" I thought about Patricia's letter, about Jonathan learning to work for someone else, about the Christmas dinner where Dylan made them laugh with stories about his students, about the mortgage payments that arrived exactly on time every month. "Yes," I told her, "I think there's always hope, but it starts with telling the truth, even when the truth is hard to hear. Especially when the truth is hard to hear."